Jacky is one of the most mechanically weak tanks in the game, despite her seemingly medium place in the meta. Her over-reliance on walls and her lack of a reliable approach tool have led to her rarely being used in a competitive setting outside of her niche and being considered an anomaly among tanks. Let's take a look at what Jacky's niche is and what sets her so radically apart from other tanks. Now, let's continue the most worrying trend in this channel, asking for your support. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Only 15% of you are subscribed, so try and get that number up. I know you want. Watch the full video if you're interested in the topic and enjoy. Before I begin the video, I want to give a big thank you to Pika for helping me come up with some of the themes of this videos. Tanks for the win. Am I right? With those things out of the way, let's get to talking about Jacky. Jacky is one of the most interesting tank brawlers. Like most other tanks, she has a very short range and a large amount of health. But her main attack is what separates her from the rest of the pack. Her main attack is a circle with a 3.3 tile range around her and deals 2480 damage at max level. What's interesting about her main attack is that if she's close enough to a wall, her attack circle can damage opponents on the other side of the wall. Because of this unique attack, Jacky is able to perform very well if the map has many walls, which is even better than other tanks. All tanks are innately better with more walls on a map. The more walls there are, the less area is open, and the more cover it is for the tanks to hide behind, which helps them stay alive against longer-range brawlers as they are able to camp behind the wall until the right time to strike. But Jacky takes this to another level. The one drawback of walls to most tanks is that they can't attack beyond it, so they mostly have to stay patient until they have a chance to try and get their super. However, for Jacky, if the opponent is right on the other side of the wall, she can attack and damage them, either forcing them back or killing them. Even if she doesn't kill them, the damage she deals helps her gain her super. Speaking of Jacky's super, let's talk about Jacky's super. Jacky's super is basically the exact same as her main attack, but instead of the radius being 3.3 tiles, it's 5 tiles. And instead of damaging opponents, the super pulls enemies toward Jacky, letting her attack the pulled enemies. On paper, Jacky's super seems fine. It isn't a long jumping attack like Primo, or a long dash toward the enemy like Daryl or Bull, but it helps her deal with enemies by pulling them in. This should have been a definitive tool to reach her enemies better, yet in most maps, it just isn't. Why? Well, the first and main reason as to why Jacky's super isn't a real approach tool is its laughably short range. A 5-tile radius just isn't enough to reliably pull enemies in and eliminate them. To put this into perspective, a 5-tile radius is in between Bull's attack range and Ash's attack range, and we all know that they have a short range. If Jacky's super range is lower than Bull's attack range, how is she supposed to reliably pull enemies in? When she gets her super and tries to advance up the map to pull in enemies, they can merely just stay away as long as they are long-ranged and attack her from a distance, while Jacky can do nothing. If they are a tank or an assassin, even if Jacky pulls them, they can out-DPS her if she doesn't have a star power. There is also another limiting factor on the super, which is that even if you have a golden opportunity to pull someone, you have to make sure you still have ammo, as the super itself doesn't even deal any damage. If you use the super incorrectly, you may have just gifted your enemy a free ticket to eliminate you. Jacky's super also doesn't even protect her from other opponents. When you are using Jacky's super, and if you fail, even if you pull someone, you aren't invulnerable, and can still be shot and killed, making it a risk to use her super in a semi-open space even if you have full ammo and an opponent in range. With most tanks, the super is what you work towards, and it's the tool that helps you become a useful member of the team. With El Primo, he mostly just soaks up damage before he gets his first super and camps. But once he gets his super, he is able to eliminate other brawlers and remove walls, while charging up his super somewhat again, allowing him to become less passive and more aggressive for the rest of the game. The same goes for Bull, who is mostly useless before his super, but once he gets his first super, he can start being able to approach brawlers much better. With Jacky, her super's range is too low to actually be a reliable approach tool like Bull and El Primo. This makes it so that Jacky's super is less valuable than Bull and El Primo's, and so she relies less on her super than other tanks. It is important to not rely on your super too much. After all, there is an entire main attack for you, and you should still be self-sufficient even if you are not able to get your super. This is why tanks that are over-reliant on their super like El Primo or Bull are rarely consistent meta brawlers. As in a meta that even slightly is against tanks, they are unable to get their super, and as a consequence, they are mostly useless for the entire game, as they are stuck hiding behind cover trying pathetically to get their super. This is where the tank trait comes into play. The tank trait allows tanks to charge up their super by merely getting attacked by the enemy. Usually, a super gets charged by being aggressive and pursuing enemies. But what if you get absolutely shredded the moment you try to chase enemies? What if you have a low range? What if instead of thriving on an aggressive playstyle to get your super, you thrive on a more passive one? These reasons led to the creation of not only the tank trait, but also the supercharge trait. While the tank trait allows tanks to charge up their super by getting attacked by the enemy, the supercharge trait allows brawlers that have it to charge up their super passively. These two traits are an important addition as they allow alternative ways to get supers. And this impacted Jacky as well as she received the tank trait. Or did it? For most tanks, the tank trait was a lifesaver. I've detailed the impact the tank trait had on El Primo on my PowerPoint on El Primo, so go check that one out after watching this video. But to summarize it, it made a huge difference for tanks. No longer did tanks have to only be used on extremely closed maps, as they could now feasibly fare at least a little better on more open maps, as they could now get their super by just soaking up damage and move up the map with their super. And then there was Jacky. I've already mentioned why her super is very underwhelming, but spending the whole game, or at least part of it soaking up damage and feeding your opponent's super to get a 5-tile range pull is not worth it. Based on what I have said so far in this video, you would probably think Jacky is the worst brawler in the game and a disgrace to the tank class. Most tanks have more reliable approach tools than her that are actually usable. Frank can just use his absolutely ridiculous HP to soak up damage and move up. Bull, Primo, and Daryl have supers that give them great mobility. Rosa doesn't have the most defined approach tool, but she still has a shield that lets her move up with less punishment, and Buster has a super that shields him from attacks and lets him move up. Other than something that I will talk about later in the video, all Jacky has is a super that is basically only used as a finisher and is the biggest sitting duck out of all the tanks. Yet she isn't the worst brawler, though she may be a disgrace to the tank class. She isn't even the worst tank. Brawlers like Hank, Primo, and Bull are all worse than her in the meta. So what makes her good if she has no reliable approach tool? The answer to that question can be found in two places, her niche and her kit. Let's take a look at her niche first. Most tanks nowadays are specialists. Unless you're picking Meg, basically no other tank can be a viable first pick, or even second or third. Most tanks are a last pick, and this especially is true for Jacky. She, along with most other tanks, has hard counters like Clancy, Surge, Lou, Colette, Gale, and so on and so forth. Because of her large amount of counters, she is best as a last pick. And this is true for most maps where tanks in general are useful. But unlike tanks like Bull or Primo who are extremely ill-advised first picks, Jacky actually has situations where she is an extremely coveted first pick, even despite her counters, which is why she is still somewhat used. Specifically, let's go over 2 ranked maps that Jacky is especially overpowered in, and why she is so good on those maps. The first map I'm going to talk about is Canal Grande. When we first look at Canal Grande, one thing becomes clear. Instead of the usual 3 different lanes, there are only 2, not counting brawlers like Eve and Angelo being able to use the water. Normally, this forces 2 of the weaker brawlers to group up and the strongest brawler to go by themselves. But on Canal Grande, things become more interesting. With the large number of bushes on each side and the specific meta this map has, it's actually better to start out with all 3 teammates going on the same side. This allows you to fight on equal footing with the enemy and gain some semblance of control, as splitting up could cause you to lose control if both sides lose their lane, and losing control on Canal Grande is basically losing the game. Of course, once control is established, you can start to split up to gain control of both sides and stop movement into mid, letting you coast through the rest of the game. Now that we've gone over the basics of how Canal Grande is played, let's go over why Jacky is so good at it. The first reason ties back to one of my main points on the last slide, having 3 brawlers going in the same lane. The nature of Jacky's main attack allows her to punish grouping together severely, and even if she doesn't eliminate them, she can use her super to finish them off and gain map control and a large boost in stars. The regular and unbreakable walls in the middle of each side allow Jacky to hide behind them and use her attack to attack enemies on the other side of this wall. This seals the deal for Jacky's usefulness on the map, as it allows her to counter many brawlers in the game, and even stand a chance against some of her counters like Gale, Surge, and Clancy if your teammates haven't fed them their supers. Now, let's go over her second cracked map, Parallel Plays. Parallel Plays is a hot zone map with 2 zones, with the defining feature being the unbreakable walls in the middle of each zone. This turns the map from being a marksman and controller-based map to a very interesting map with several different meta-brawlers. Throwers like Barley, Larry, and a good Dynamite are solid on this map, as well as brawlers that can attack across walls, like Doug, BB, and the subject of this presentation, Jacky. She is able to camp behind the unbreakable wall and attack her enemies from behind it. As with her Canal Grande, as long as her teammates don't feed her counters their supers, she can just chill behind unbreakable walls and punish enemies that get too close. Why did I go over specific maps Jacky is good on? To highlight why Jacky is an actually usable pick and not an instant F-tier brawler. Unlike brawlers like Primo or Bull who don't have specific maps that they are insane in, Jacky does and will continue to be used in those maps, allowing her to carve her own niche as long as closed maps with unbreakable walls continue to exist. But now let's look at the second reason Jacky is remotely usable. To look at this reason, we need a little bit of background. Let's go over Jacky's kit. Her first gadget is Pneumatic Booster, which gives her an extra 200 movement speed for 4 seconds. Her second gadget is Rebuild, which restores all broken environments within a 3x3 tile area. Her first star power is Counter Crush, which performs a counterattack after being damaged that's 4 tiles long and damages anyone inside the radius for 30% of the damage Jacky received. Jacky's other star power is Hard Hat, which reduces all damage she takes in the match by 20%. Jacky's star powers are both solid additions to her kit, with her Counter Crush star power being useful against brawlers who deal high DPS in her range, like Shelly or Bull. Her other star power, Hard Hat, is useful in general and helps her soak up damage better and move up better, as she no longer takes as much damage as before. However, while these star powers are good additions to this kit, they don't single-handedly make her a usable brawler. Something else that I have mentioned does. What is that something? Pneumatic Booster. With Pneumatic Booster, Jacky suddenly has a bit of an approach tool. I've mentioned earlier that Jacky has no real approach tool, and since she has such a short range, she needs an approach tool in at least some part of her kit. And that part of her kit ends up being an unlockable in the form of her gadget. This approach tool is more similar to Rose's and Buster's shield in terms of its purpose than Daryl or Bull's super. This approach tool is more used as a way for Jacky to easily move up in a more natural, yet punishing manner. This is because Jacky still has to be able to dodge well even with the speed boost in order to not die, unlike brawlers like Primo who don't have to worry about dodging when using his approach tool. Despite its flaws, Jacky's gadget is her only reliable approach tool, and so she ends up having to rely on it much like other tanks rely on their super. The gadget has a variety of uses, such as helping to escape, helping to dodge better, or simply just approaching other brawlers. With these many uses that basically nothing else in her kit can give her, it is no wonder that Jacky relies so heavily on this gadget to actually be useful in maps that are not named Parallel Plays or Canal Grande. A heavy reliance on an unlockable is never a good sign. So what did Supercell do to fix this? Give her another unlockable to rely even more heavily on. In the first batch of Hypercharges, Jacky received her Hypercharge, which instantly boosted her to the top of the meta, but it did for every other brawler as well. So let's just go over the Hypercharge itself. The Hypercharge allowed her to slow enemies up to 8.67 tiles away after using her super. This coupled with her speed boost now allowed her to be able basically assassinate any enemy within the range, with her stat buffs and her slow of the enemy. On paper, this seemed like it would fix her inability to move up the map and battle against enemies without being a sitting duck without her gadget, but it wasn't really the case. First of all, she still needed to charge up her Hypercharge in the first place, which brought us back to square one with her problems. Second of all, her Hypercharge became gradually less and less useful with the release of other Hypercharges for other brawlers that could rival hers and made it so that her Hypercharge was no longer an insta-kill. And so instead of fixing Jacky's problem, Her Hypercharge just strengthened her strengths and basically ignored her weaknesses with mere stat and range buffs. Thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server